friends, and welcome to the board's regular meeting of October 25, 2023. I wish to acknowledge on behalf of the board that we're meeting this evening on the traditional lands and territories of the Wasanic people who have lived, learned, worked, and stewarded these lands for many thousands of years. And we offer this acknowledgement in an effort to encourage sincere efforts at continued reconciliation. I wish to acknowledge and welcome members of the management team to our board meeting this evening. Superintendent Everwin, who is joining us virtually online. Welcome, Superintendent. Secretary Treasurer Reed, who is to my left. Assistant Superintendent McKenzie. Director of Instruction Hunter, and Director of Instruction Westgate. And as well, I welcome representatives of our partner groups. The top left corner, Mr. Peterson, representing the Saanich Teachers Association. And below Mr. Peterson, Ms. Nola Welsh, representing CUPE 441. To her right, Mary Kasher, representing the Saanich Administrators Association. Welcome. And then on the right, Ms. Megan Missabin, the chair of the Confederation of Parent Advisory Councils of Saanich. Welcome, partners. We should proceed with adopting the agenda. Is there a motion, please, to adopt the agenda as circulated? Trustee Van Well, seconder, Trustee Vandal. Any discussion? Are there any late items? Trustee Van Well.
I had two reports to report on under trustee representatives.
Okay.
About number 13. The first is the Family and Youth Court, which I attended last month, and then Provincial Council.
All right, I don't think we'll need an amendment at this point for those.
Okay.
The item is there.
Yep.
And so you just speak up, Trustee Van Wel, and there may be others too. So thank you for bringing those to our attention. Are there any other proposed amendments or late items or revisions to the agenda? All right, all in favor of adoption of the agenda as circulated? Any opposed? Motion is carried and the agenda is adopted. Thank you. Prior to this regular meeting, we held an in-camera meeting and discussed personnel matters and facilities. Item 3 of the agenda is adoption of board meeting minutes of September 2023, last month. Are there any errors or omissions to the minutes for a regular meeting of September 2023? Trustee Silzer?
Chair, I note on item 9.9, the education directions within the court section. The word carried was omitted from the motion.
And it was carried, was it?
It was carried, yes.
All right. Thank you. Is there any objection to including the result of the vote as carried, trustees? Done, Trustee Silzer. That will be inserted. Are there any other corrections, errors, or omissions to the minutes? All right. I declare that the minutes be adopted with that change. Thank you, Trustee Silzer. Now, there is business arising from the minutes, and for that, I will turn to Superintendent Everett.
Good evening. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Give me just a second here. For the business arising, last board meeting, the board asked me to follow up on some clarifications they required based on PETA, which is the whistleblower legislation that has come into effect for K-12 schools. You will see a briefing note in your files that answers the 4 questions that the board asked of me last month. The first question, all questions revolved around complaints that were about the superintendent and specifically complaints that could be forwarded to the office of the ombudsperson. The 4 questions were, what is the process of initiating a complaint? Who retains custody of the complaint materials? Would notice be provided to the board? And would the superintendent be made aware of the complaint? I spent some considerable time contacting several sources to answer those questions, as the original material provided by the Employers Association on this particular legislative requirement was not complete enough to answer these questions. I contacted legal counsel at the Employers Association. I also spent time on the phone with 2 different representatives from the Office of the Ombudsperson, and I did some research on the Ombudsperson website as well. And I have some answers for the board for these 4 questions. First, with regards to the process of initiating a complaint, what's important to realize is that a person can make a complaint about the superintendent either to the board itself or to the Office of the Ombudsperson. The Office of the Ombudsperson will only investigate a complaint if it fits within their definition of wrongdoing. I have repeated those criteria for wrongdoing within the briefing note. I won't go over them at this time, but they are also within the admin procedure. If the complaint falls within that definition of wrongdoing, and if the person is a present or past employee, and if the complaint is of a sufficient level to warrant an investigation, then the Office of the Ombudsperson will initiate an investigation. However, they will not investigate a complaint if the complainant is not a current or former employee, if the alleged wrongdoing is not associated within the school district, or if the allegations do not meet the threshold for wrongdoing as defined in the Act. And the Ombudsperson would then reply to the complainant with a written response to why they won't be pursuing it. With regards to the second question of who has custody of the materials, if the complainant forwards their complaint directly to the Office of the Ombudsperson, that office will retain all records. If the board receives the complaint and needs to forward it to the Office of the Ombudsperson because it falls within that category of wrongdoing, the board has the option of retaining a copy of the records for itself, but it must forward all of the records in question to the Office of the Ombudsperson. For question number 3, would notice be provided to the board? The board chair would only be notified if there was an investigation that was launched and completed. If the evidence supports a finding of wrongdoing, according to the Act, then the report would include recommendations for the board chair and hence the board's consideration. Not all allegations would qualify as wrongdoing, and if the complaint doesn't meet this threshold, then the Office of the Ombudsperson would not send notification to the board chair at that time. And the final question is, would the superintendent be notified? If the Ombudsperson determines that an investigation is warranted, the superintendent would be contacted and would be provided with an opportunity to respond to the allegations made within the original complaint. So I believe that satisfies the questions, but certainly if there are further questions, I can take them. What I have done is, as within AP 451, I have clearly, I have increased the clarity in terms of what wrongdoing is. I have created a hyperlink to the Office of the Ombudsperson, and I've tried to keep it as straightforward as possible. What we don't want to do is provide a cumbersome mechanism for somebody who wishes to lodge a complaint. We want to make it as straightforward as possible and provide the necessary information. And I think that has now been done within AP 451. I have, as I said, created a hyperlink in section 7.3. There is a description of what classifies itself as a wrongdoing, and there is clear language that indicates that a designated officer would be appointed if appropriate, and that person could very well be the director of HR or somebody else within the senior team. So I hope that answers the board's inquiries from last month, and I'm open to any questions at this time.
Thank you for the superintendent. Trustee Silver.
Chair. Thank you, Superintendent, for this briefing note. So just to clarify, you say here that the Office of the Ombudsperson will not investigate a complaint if the complainant is not a current or former employee.
That's correct.
In the administrative procedure, 560, I believe, is it, I'm wondering if it's clear that a complaint needs to be, if it's to be directed to the Office of the Ombudsperson, cannot be anybody else. It has to be a former or current employee. So that means that if a parent or anyone else outside the employment of the school district had a complaint, they would have to file a complaint with the board chair. Is that correct?
That is correct. If it is not a current or former employee, then the Office of the Ombudsperson would return to the complainant a reason saying that since they're not a current or former employee, that they would not investigate and they'd have to forward it on to the school board. They would get that information from the Office of the Ombudsperson. What I could do in 7.3, Trustee Silzer, though, is put another clarifying point there that the Office of the Ombudsperson will only investigate complaints of the superintendent if the complainant is a current or former employee.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for or discussion about this report of the superintendent? Thank you, Superintendent. That completes that matter.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll move then to item 5 and the opportunity for any questions from our partner group representatives or the public. Are there any questions? All right, then not seeing any, we'll move on to item 6, which is the report from the chair. And in that regard, this has been a very busy month for the board since our September 20 meeting. Immediately following the board meeting last month, almost all of us gathered at the Parkland track for the official opening hosted by the school of the Parkland track. And most of the trustees were able to attend. Guests included former Parkland Principal Lizanne Chicano, the Mayor of Sydney, and Ms. Sheila Fay, the President of the Memorial Park Society. And this was the culmination of many years of effort. Particular appreciation expressed to Secretary Treasurer Reid for his work with the municipalities of North Saanich and Sydney in partnering for funding, and with Director Lum for his work behind the scenes. My report is going to be somewhat lengthy, and I see, Ms. Mizovic, that you did get your hand up, and I didn't see that or acknowledge that. So let's take your question now.
Sorry, I'm gonna. Apologies, I'm slow on the hand raise and that I'm not there on purpose. We went to Scream Fest last night, so nobody slept at our house last evening. It was too scary.
Quite all right. It may be that the board's happy to hear you rather than me anyway. So please
no, I'll be waiting with bated breath for the Parkland track update. But I just wanted to ask a question. I had the pleasure of going to committee day this last week and really enjoyed listening about the energy plan. And I wanted to ask a question about the history involved in having that plan and whether or not there would be an appetite or a process to expanding the scope of that plan beyond vehicles, paper, and building energy to expand the scope around more kind of related aspects around curriculum, involvement in other aspects of the education system around climate sustainability and ecology. So that's a bit of a broad question, but I just wanted to plant that seed because I really enjoyed that presentation and think that similar to other districts on the island, there is a bit of a broader part of the environment, sustainability and ecology kind of topic for their plans. So I wanted to raise that as a question for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Secretary Treasurer Reid will probably have a go at that initially, and perhaps Superintendent Eberlin as well, if he chooses.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question. I can comment on the scope of the plan and the reasons for the scope of the plan. The plan is really tied to the province's overall targets around GHG reductions, and so the scope of the plan is focusing on those areas that are within our control to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, and so that relates to buildings, vehicles, and paper. And so that's the reason for the scope of the plan, and it is a facilities plan in that it ties into the capital plan as the capital plan prioritizes projects that have greenhouse gas reductions, such as HVAC upgrades, and it also ties into the capital plan around bus replacements with electric buses. And so that's really the purpose of that plan, is to drive those facilities and vehicle and capital type decisions. But I do acknowledge that the overall objective of greenhouse gas emissions does tie into those broader goals around educational programs and other areas.
Superintendent, did you wish to comment?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the Secretary Treasurer did an admirable job. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further, Ms. Misbeck?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, and we'll return to the chair's report. I actually was done with the Parkland track, although the community isn't. It's going to be with us for a very long time, and we're going to have assistance from our municipal neighbors when it comes time for renewal as well. That was followed the very next day by the non-instructional day at the Mary Winspear Center, which was a district-wide teaching staff and admin, a day where we heard from keynote speaker Dr. Negan Sinclair, the son of the chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, Murray Sinclair, who is the head of the Indigenous Studies Department at the University of Manitoba. His theme was Climbing the Mountain, and Dr. Sinclair provided us with an impressive presentation of personal history and anecdotes, exploring Indigenous education opportunities and themes related to reconciliation. And it was a first-class day, and the room was full, and I think almost all of our district staff, teaching staff, was there. I want to mention as well, of course, the transportation review, which I mentioned in the report in September. The transportation policy review proceeded to the next stages of 3 open houses in the north, central, and south zones this month, and a virtual meeting last Monday on October the 23rd. I want to express again particular appreciation to Secretary Treasurer Reid for organizing and leading and presenting at these open houses, with particular thanks for his professionalism demonstrated in the virtual meeting last Monday. The purpose of these was to inform parents and guardians and interested public before seeking final input for the board's final consideration and adoption of revisions to the transportation policy. There was consistent attendance in each, and the attendees were not shy about voicing their concerns and wishes. And I'm pleased that trustee representation was present at all of those as well. So we look forward after the final input to the final steps for the board in consideration of its revisions and adopting the policy. On October 10, the Minister of State for Childcare, Mr. Lohr, attended our district. This was a tour of childcare facilities, not only in our Saanich district, but also in Sooke, relating to her portfolio, and it was organized by Beacon Community Services, for which I thank for this. Her visit to us included passing by, because it's not yet open, the Shishisha Child Care Facility, but she also attended at ILC. And Vice Chair McMurphy and Secretary Treasurer Reid and I were pleased to attend as well and engage with her and accompany her around ILC for that. I am the board's servant when it comes to Vista as well, a representative for Vista. But I'll include a report on the October 13 and 14 fall conference here in Nanaimo in this report. 4 trustees attended along with Secretary Treasurer Reid. And the format for this session was a little different from the historical format that we're used to. Typically, we would meet on Friday evening, and there would be a presentation and a speaker and some networking. And then on Saturday, we would have our business meeting and depart by about noon or 1 o'clock. This time, we had a full Friday afternoon and evening and a full Saturday. Friday afternoon was largely consumed with a presentation by Julie McRae on governance, which was probably a particular assistance to new trustees. And that was followed by the business meeting. Saturday largely involved a BC STA presentation on leadership for continuous improvement, which is another way of describing FESL, the Framework for Enhanced Student Learning. And in the afternoon, I think we agreed that one of the highlights was a presentation by Dr. Jennifer Charlesworth, the representative for children and youth, as she gave a moving presentation of the work, her work and her department's work for children in care. This consisted of case studies that we were able to review and discuss, tragedies, successes, sought improvements, and the role of schools as part of the equation. After all, our staff stands in loco parentis, in the position of parent to the students when they're in school. So she emphasized that this was part of the equation. Schools are part of the solution, but that they're called upon sometimes to do perhaps a disproportionate amount of the effort. One of the most striking statistics that she offered us was that in the last year, 157 students were taken into care whose parents, both parents, passed away from opioid overdoses. So you can imagine the difficulties, the tragedies, and the trauma for those children that the department sees. I think it's fair to say that everybody in the room was moved by her presentation and determined that it has to receive greater priority. Student voice is going to be with us again. Trustees will recall that last year, staff led us to the middle and secondary schools to hear the students' perspectives on 4 goals in our strategic plan. That will occur again. And this was canvassed at Directions last week. The continuous student voice process is most important to us as we continue to seek progress in achieving our goals. Thank you to senior staff for developing and arranging and coordinating these visits. Thank you to COPAC's Chair Misovic for planning and hosting, with the support of the superintendent, COPAC's 101 last week at Bayside Middle School. This was an opportunity for trustees and staff to be able to attend and support parents as they considered and developed their work as our partner in public education in the Saanich district. It was well attended, approximately 30 parents, who struck me as fully engaged and supportive of the work and enthused as well. So thank you again, Ms. Misovic, for the opportunity to attend and support our partner in that way. The monthly COPAC's meeting was thus postponed to tomorrow evening, and Trustee Manuel and I will be attending that on behalf of the board. I do want to talk briefly about Advocacy Day, which was held October 19th at the Empress Hotel at the Legislature. Trustees will recall that this was an initiative of BC school trustees, and as opposed to having a chairs day with the usual superintendent, secretary, treasurers, and board chairs conference, this replaced that. The approach was to encourage boards to start developing a continuing relationship with their MLAs. And for some of the districts, that was new. I'm pleased that we have a relationship with our MLAs, but I'm particularly pleased that 57 of 60 board chairs attended. We first met for breakfast at the Empress and then wandered over to the legislature for member statements and question period, which was interrupted by the great shakedown, the provincial earthquake drill, and we all had to exit the legislature, hoping that those ancient bricks would not fall as we did. No one was hurt, and we returned. And then the essence of it was lunch with the MLAs. Our two did not attend for whatever reason. They were present in question period, but maybe they had prior commitments. I don't know. They didn't make it over to the lunch. So I spent a nice time with former board chair of SUC, Ravi Parmar, who's of course the most recently elected government MLA. And in the absence of our representatives, I elbowed my way into the circle surrounding the Minister of Finance and made a pitch about unfunded inflationary costs. She was familiar with that. I left our strategic plan and our advocacy plan with her staff. And in my discussion with her, brief though it was, she had heard it before. And she gave an indication that the funding formula, the draft new revised funding formula, was not completely dead. But would of course not commit to it, saying it had to come to the Ministry of Education and Treasury Board, which we all know. But given that she was there, I thought it couldn't hurt that she heard about it. And then I also was able to engage briefly with Ministry of Education Singh, who unprompted remembered, having seen my name tag, remembered the meeting that Vice Chair McMurphy and I had with her last February. Complimented us on our local chocolates, and I advised that we'd be limited in providing more until the inflationary costs issue. But it was very good to be able to speak candidly with the two ministers on that issue. Notwithstanding that, I believe that this will require continued and focused advocacy by our board and others if we are to receive some relief on that question. The BCSTA Academy will be held November 23 to 25 in Vancouver at the Western Bay Shore. Executive Assistant Glancy is already making arrangements for trustees who wish to attend, and the team will be guiding an evening journey. And finally, we want to deal with the December 7 board planning day. Trustees, you'll see on the agenda that it's noted specifically under the chair's report. And the expectation and hope is that this evening, after completion of this report, we would settle on a theme, on a topic for the December 7 planning day. After the most recent chair-vice chair meeting, I emailed trustees with 2 suggestions, and there's been a third. Of course, it's incumbent on Vice Chair McMurphy and me as chair to do some preliminary work on this. And we do have a recommendation for the board to consider. The board will make its decision, but that recommendation might be described as, I've done my best with the title, but it arises out of the BCSTA presentation at Vista and also some of our discussions on student voice at the Ed Directions Committee. And it might be described as understanding the board's responsibility for continuous student improvement through examining the planning cycle and evidence-based decision-making, or something like that. In addition to that, we had a suggestion, and I did email about this too. The title would be Defining a Shared Vision of the Saanich Global Citizen. This relates, of course, to the fourth strategic plan goal and could include consideration of divisive social issues such as SOGI and teaching and learning materials and social pressures on students. And then yesterday, thanks to Trustee Silser, there was a suggestion with respect to an initiative by the Victoria Family Court and Youth Justice Committee. The reason I'm suggesting that we give serious consideration to the first opportunity, the first suggested topic, is that it's broader and it relates to our fundamental mandate to ensure not only understanding but implement, cooperating and governing for continuous student improvement. But those are my attempts at describing it. I would appreciate, the board would appreciate your thoughts. And perhaps we can accommodate a little discussion about these. Others may be able to describe them or indicate preference better than I have. But it would seem to me that after brief discussion, we should be able to settle on a motion and make some decisions. So I'll open the floor. That completes my report, and I'll open the floor on the issue of the topic for the December 7th board planning date. Trustee Silser.
Thank you, Chair. First, a couple of questions. Were you planning to have planning days facilitated by someone?
Yes. Yes. Depending on the topic, it would seem to me if it's the one I suggested, there would be a significant role for senior staff. But as well, I did speak with the chair or the president of BCSDA at Vista, and she said we have all kinds of resources and people who we could probably call on, providing they fit our date. But please, Tim, phone me anytime.
Second question, thank you, is how many hours will we have?
It's a half day. Secretary, do you remember the time?
The calendar for the board just specifies December 7th. It has in the past been a half day, but it could be longer than a half day if the board wishes.
Okay, so we have some discretion there, Trustee Silver.
And I would just maybe, I wanted to, two things more. One was that I went over Julie McCrae's presentation about governance, which I found really, really helpful. And she poses some questions that I think probably the four trustees who were four trustees who at the table probably had a good opportunity to discuss these. But I liked what she said about the board focusing as a board. This was her question. Do we collectively use our agreed upon strategic direction as both a filter and focusing tool? And what that made me think of was the board using our strategic plan as a filter, so to speak, or as a foundation for our planning day. And it kind of ties in with what you were suggesting in terms of also thinking to the strategic plan for a couple of themes. But I was wondering if there was some way we could look at each of the four strategic priorities and divide our time into addressing literacy is a little different, but mental health and wellness, Indigenous education, and global citizenship. And if we had, if you think in terms of conferences, they do this all the time. They fit a lot into 1 hour or an hour and a half, and have some good discussion about where we're going as a board with respect to our strategic directions in terms of policy and governance. So we're expecting the whole district to be focused on these priorities, how can we as a board also focus on these priorities? So in a sense, what you've suggested would, but I think if we had the actual titles of mental health and wellness, which might tie into what the child advocate mentioned, that there'd be a focus on the opioid crisis and what's happening in our district and how are we dealing with the cases that we have, or what are we doing to help prevent these situations. For example, on global citizenship, would there be something about the climate crisis, for example, or about anyway, I think you get the idea of
Yeah.
what that here is that the BCSTA, what the question of continuous improvement and all that, that is, I think every single academy I've been to, and now that I would have been about 4 or 5 of them, that's on the agenda. And that's something that would be helpful probably for all of the board members to be in on a discussion like that. But for me, it seems a little too dry. Sorry, and it doesn't specifically, maybe it can more directly tie into our strategic priorities. Yes, it should. But I think if we looked at the priorities, honed in on a couple of the most critical issues under each one of those strategic priorities, that might help us. And with the help of BCSTA facilitating, we'll get some good discussion.
So let me see if I can paraphrase what I understand you should be suggesting, Trustee Sills, and that would be that the board planning day that we focus on at least 3 of the 4 strategic goals in the strategic plan from a governance perspective, and receive information and consider approaches to maximizing our progress with those. Is that a fair, rough approximation? Okay. Thank you. Is there any other discussion, suggestions, trustees? Trustee Hickman.
I would just like to support Trustee Selzer's suggestion. What I'm hearing, that really does tie into the board's responsibility for continuous student improvement. That's what our priorities are intended to do. And so there's a good tie into that. So I will be in support of that. Thank you.
Trustee Elder.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the suggestions as well. I think if we are spending half a day together, I do like the idea of having a facilitator and having senior staff there as appropriate. I don't think it needs to be everybody spending a half day from the whole team. It might be that a topic would suggest that somebody could join for a while and not have to be there for the whole time as a resource person. I think that it should feel like a facilitated discussion among trustees, supported by senior staff, as opposed to reports from senior staff and that sort of thing. With a high level question running through it of how we can be better governors in these domains, not how the district can be better at teaching global citizenship or supporting mental health, but how as governors we can do whatever is in our realm to ensure that everyone is as supportive as possible in those domains. I like the idea of spending some time with that question in each of the 4 domains from the strategic plan. I'm a bigger fan of spending more time on the question of the planning cycle, because I think the board is best able to provide good governance if it's receiving good evidence of success or lack thereof in relation to the priorities of the district. And I would like us to talk about how we can, as governors, be more supportive of more evidence coming to us around the areas of the strategic plan. So I see something like a half day of a good chunk of time on the question of evidence-based planning, and then some touching down into each of the domains of the strat plan. It might only be half an hour on each of them. How can we be better governors in support of literacy? How can we be better governors in support of Indigenous success, et cetera? And then that's, you know, a half of that time being on evidence-based planning, the other half being on just that question in relation to each of the goals of the strategic, or the areas of the strategic plan. And I do like the idea of it being facilitated by a support and by it being a facilitated conversation among trustees allowing the chair to be an equal participant in that rather than having to shepherd the conversation on. Those are my thoughts.
I would welcome that. So really, Trustee Elder, you're suggesting that we can marry the two ideas, yes? Trustee McMurphy.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to throw a pragmatic suggestion, first of all, and that is with regard to venue and timing. I'm assuming that we'll be at ILC. I was thinking it would be great if we could get together, say, about 11:30 and share, bring bread together, have some kind of lunch, and then work from something like 1 to 4, like 4 hours of concentrated work. And I also appreciated Trustee Elder's suggestion that we probably don't need all staff for the whole time there, because it is asking them to give up a lot and they've got other things to do, but there might be some points that are more valuable than others that we need to have there. I guess my overall view of it is that I feel this responsibility to offer leadership to the district in the direction that we want the district to go. And now I don't know how to quite encapsulate that in what it would look like we would be doing in order to do that. But I feel this responsibility that we have to focus on what leadership we can offer to whom and how, of what's our goal. And so, and part of that is our responsibility to encourage action, encourage the leaders in our district to act. And when I say leaders, I mean everybody at all levels, because the leadership comes in a variety of ways and stages and places. So I think we can think of that encouragement to act quite globally, because we need to get that deeper understanding, I think, of what our four strategic directions are. Specifically, I think the one that's perhaps most nebulous or least well defined or open to the most interpretations is the global citizenship one. And I think if we concentrated on that, I'm not sure we can do all four and with everything else in 4 hours, but I think the global citizenship and understanding what portion of the continuous the focus on student success, what portion of that is our domain? Not what everybody else is doing, but what do we need to do? What strategic decisions do we need to make? What actions do we need to take? What commitment of resources do we need to put forward, et cetera? And I think did you mention the planning cycle, or somebody mentioned the planning cycle? I think, looking at that in terms of our work for the year or years, we have 3 years to go. So, let's not confine ourselves to next month. We can be fairly forward-looking, I hope. And what kind of, if we're talking about evidence-based decision-making, what kind of evidence do we want? What kind of evidence do we need? What kind of, and how would we get it? How can we engage with our various communities to see if our message, if our leadership is having any impact, is making any difference, or getting the feedback that says, what you're doing is great, but it'd be greater if you did this or that or the other thing. So finding some avenues of communication, and certainly the ultimate thing we have to talk about is our continued advocacy for public education, and specifically for the financial support.
Thank you. I am sensing some consistency on this side of the room in the comments that have been made, beginning with Trustee Silser's idea that we focus on, from a governance perspective, on the strategic priorities. Trustee Elder's suggestion that in doing so, we focus on our job as governors and the planning cycle and evidence. And you have described that a second way, or another way, Trustee McCarthy. So those do fit, I think. I'm wondering if we're at the point where someone would like to tackle a motion so that we can define this a little bit better. And otherwise, we're just left with a sense. And I would rather have some clear direction from the board about this so that we can start making arrangements. Trustee Sills, you had your hand up.
Yes, this is, I don't know if there's any way to marry this with what we've just discussed, but I really appreciated after Ed Directions Committee, Henrietta, and the Brise sent us a copy of the tool that they've used about pluralism reflection tool for schools, but it also has governance elements to it. And there are questions that could be plugged into the plan. Now, so that's just to add. She very kindly, this is a really, really valuable tool. And it's obviously being successfully used in the district, and it has, it's not just for the front line, it's also for policy makers and governors. So whoever's facilitating, perhaps that would be something for them to look at.
Trustee Elder.
I'm interested in this concluding so that we can move on with the rest of the business. And I'd be happy to put a motion on the floor unless others want to participate in the general discussion before that.
I've been seeing Trustee McMurphy writing, but I don't know what for her intent. So you have the floor, Trustee Elder.
I was thinking that I move that the board organize for a half-day facilitated planning session on December 7th. With the topics being governance support for evidence-based planning and governance support for reaching, achieving the ideals as described in the strategic plan.
Achieving the ideals,
The ones that are in the 4 domains of the strategic plan.
Right. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Trustee McMurphy. Anything further, Trustee Elder? Any discussion on that motion? Trustees, are you clear on the motion? I'm sorry?
Can be read again.
That the board organized for a half-day facilitated planning session on December 7th with the topics being governance, support of evidence-based planning, right? Or governance and governance support for achieving the ideals as described in the strategic plan.
4 domains.
Okay.
For achieving the 4 domains.
Got that.
Trustee McMurphy.
I'll try and end it. Could we say up to 4? I'm just thinking with 4 hours and all that we want to do, that focusing on all 4 as well as everything. The other parts may be a bit much. What was the one that you left out, Trustee Sills?
Literacy.
Literacy.
Yeah.
How about 3?
I'd be fine with that.
Trustees, is there any objection to the proposed amendment that be limited to 3? The latter 3, literacy, would be excluded, I think.
Indigenous learners, success, mental health and wellness, and global citizenship.
Actually, you know what? Literacy is a bit of a problem. We need to focus on literacy. And we need to make sure that the global citizen is, I think, more fleshed out. I would amend it to say that we focus on literacy and global citizenship.
Just two?
I think so,
You're making that amendment.
yes.
Is there a seconder for that? No seconder, trustee. So at this point, we're left with the four goals, the four domains, as trustee Elder has described. Trustee Elder?
My motion is not intended to suggest that we will go deeply into each of the four domains. I think at some point during that discussion, we can touch down on each of them and decide to go deeper in one or two than the others. But I think leaving it open to discuss any or all of them is my intention.
And the day will achieve its own rhythm too. We may be more content to spend more on one and less on another, for instance. Trustee Silzer.
Guess I'm wondering, what does this mean? Governance support. The topic being governance support for evidence-based planning. What does that mean exactly?
Trustee Elder.
Thank you. And governance support for achieving the ideals of the strategic plan. I just want to be clear that we're not talking about operations. I want to be clear that we're there to talk about how we as a board can support the realization of these ideals. So that it's clear that we're not there to talk about how to be better at teaching literacy or how to be better at, creating global citizens through our work in the classrooms. That's not our domain. I just want to be sure that it's clear that we're there to talk about governance and only governance.
And I think you did say that too.
Yeah, and that's what I'm really want to focus on, is how do we become better governors?
Yeah.
That's basically it.
In this context.
In this context, how do we, it's professional development for trustees. How do we be better governors? How do we perform our roles as set out? But that's why the BCSTA will be a perfect resource for us, because that's their job, to help us. For example, there's one of our jobs, as was described as governing for results, is to engage with the community. How are we doing? Each of us and together, how are we engaging with the community with respect to our strategic priorities? If our strategic priority, one of them is global citizenship, how are we being better global citizens with our communities? So that's what I would hope we're aiming for.
Yes, I see that, Trustee Silzer, and I do think that my sense is the board supports that. Circumscribed, if you will, by the context of the strategic plan. We're not going to spend, if this motion passes, it's not going to be a full-blown Julie McCrae governance discussion. It's going to be circumscribed by our strat plan goals, our four domains. But I think you are repeating the gospel. Trustee Hickman.
Thank you, Chair. Could we lean on our senior executives to help us guide us in which of the four pillars we may want to be more focused on based on what they're seeing as evidence of areas of concern?
I would think that, as Trustee Elder said, if senior staff is there for some or part of the time with respect to the goals, and we could certainly have some of those discussions, Vice Chair Murphy and I with them ahead of time, they could serve as a resource for us because their information, their knowledge is indispensable. Golden is the word. All right. If you're comfortable, board, with that motion and you all understand it, and then let's vote, and then we will carry on trying to organize this. I'll get in touch with BCSTA as soon as possible. All in favor? Opposed? Right, the motion's carried. Thank you. That completes that issue, and that completes my report. We don't have a report from the superintendent of schools this evening at the regular meeting. School successes, item 8, are attached. Trustees, is there any discussion or question with respect to those? And seeing none, then we'll move to committee reports. First, the Education Directions Committee with Committee Chair Silzer, please.
We were very, very I have an excellent report on the English language learners and English language support program. The teacher leader, would you say, is Henrietta Longrun, did we say the head of the program?
Through the chair, that is correct. She holds a person of special responsibility.
Okay, and she brought three of her team members. There was 9 altogether, I think, in the team. And they gave us a really well organized and passionate report on English language learners in the district. There are about 500 of them, 535 this year. And I see that we have inherited their territorial acknowledgement at the board office. If anybody is coming by the board office, if they're here already, it's an excellent poster made by the students in the ELL program. So it was indeed a rich presentation, and we're very thankful that they came and told us about their program and passions. And then we also heard from Director Hunter and Assistant Superintendent Mackenzie about the student voice and the strategic plan for 2023-24. There's a lot to do in the next couple of months. You hear from the student voice, and the trustees are very pleased to be participating in that. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Trustee Sills? Thank you, Committee Chair Sills. Moving then to Finance, Facilities and Technology, we have the Committee Chair Albert.
Thank you, Chair. The report is provided. There was one presentation which was well received from Ready Energy Solutions. Erica Lechford, along with Director Rob Lum, presenting an update on the sustainability plan. Well received and very good information that's provided in the package. And we look forward to getting continued updates to learn how well we're doing in the key areas of greenhouse gas reduction in the coming years, and we look toward the targets as described in the plan. And I would hope that in addition to receiving updates along the way, that we get opportunities to discuss at budget time which of those priorities are worthy of additional budget consideration as we move toward those important targets. Items for recommendation, there's a final enrollment and funding update provided by the Secretary Treasurer. It's included here. There is a recommendation that the expenditure budget changes based on increased enrollment, providing additional funding, and the expenditures against that funding that are advised by Secretary Treasurer and senior staff, a portion of the new money being advised for expenditure as found in the briefing note, enrolling teacher inclusive education, insurance, training, and the track. The details are all in the briefing note and fully canvassed on committee day, and the committee recommends, and I Trustee Elder move that the board approve the proposed expenditure budget changes.
Seconded. Trustee Silser. Further comment, Trustee Elder? Any discussion, trustees? I'll put the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried.
Thank you. The second item for recommendation is in relation to the long-range financial plan provided by Secretary Treasurer Reid. It was well discussed that day as on committee day as well, and is provided here. The committee recommends and I trustee Elder move that the board approve 2023 to 2026 long-range financial plan.
Second. Trustee Vandal. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried.
The third item is also in the form of a briefing note attached to this agenda as it was to the committee agenda. The 2023-24 capital plan bylaw amendment, which includes some things that weren't known to the board previously and some additional items that were confirmed, as I recall, in discussions with the ministry. So the motion is as follows. The motions are as follows. The committee recommends, and I trustee Elder move that the board approve the first reading of capital project bylaw number 2023-24-CPSD 63-02.
Second. Trustee Vandal? Trustee Elder?
No.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Committee recommends, and I, Trustee Elder, move that the board approve the second reading of capital project bylaw number 2023/24-CPSD 63-02.
Second. Trustee Hickman? Any discussion, trustees? All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
And ultimately, the motion to read for a third time that the board approve the reading of the capital project bylaw number 2023/24-CPSD 63-02 at this board meeting for a third time.
Is there a seconder for this? Trustee Hickman. And trustees will recall that this must be passed unanimously if we're to proceed to adopt the bylaw this evening. Is there any discussion on this? All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried unanimously.
And so, third and final reading of the project bylaw, I move that the board approve the third reading, pass and adopt capital project bylaw number 2023/24-CPSD 63-02.
Second. Trustee Vandal. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Mr. Chair, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Trustee Elder. Moving then to policy development, and I'll call for the report to Trustee McMurphy, who filled in for Committee Chair Van Well in her unavoidable absence that day. So Trustee McMurphy, please.
Okay, the motion is that the board confirm, I'm going to change it slightly, that the board confirm the amendment to policy, the amendment.
Confirm its consideration.
Pardon me?
Confirm its consideration.
No, the board, that the board confirm the amendment. I can't do the writing, sorry. That the board amend policy 3 as follows. Am I on the right one now? Which is that the board I'm sorry, to amend it to read that the board, including the organizational PD opportunities, as well as other professional trustee-directed professional development opportunities.
Sorry, and the verb is that the board confirm
Yes.
those?
Is the motion to approve the amendments or confirm the board's considering those for the 2-month consultation?
As I understand it, Trustee Murphy, we ought not to approve tonight.
Okay, so we have to say confirm consideration then?
Yeah, I thought the policy around policy changes states that when the board's considering a policy or amendment to policy, that a trustee will provide notice of motion. So that's why in the committee report that there's a column, the board confirms that it's considering these changes.
Okay, so consider that policy 3 be amended to confirm its consideration of the amendment to policy 3, role of the trustee, to include the words, to include the following, and to attend one other trustee-directed professional development opportunity.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that? It's not clear. Trustee.
Yeah.
Can I second it to get it on the floor and we can talk about the actual?
Sure.
What,
word that
yeah,
might slightly change the motion.
The discussion that we had at the policy committee reflected the idea that there should be an opportunity for individually directed trustee professional development, and there may be something other than those offered by BCSTA, BCPC, and we should put this in there as well, what is in the original one. So that there is the opportunity to take advantage of the organizational offerings, but there may be something that an individual trustee needs for professional development that is unique to him or her. So they should have the opportunity to avail themselves of that educational opportunity as well.
Trustee Stelzer?
Chair, I thought this was a notice of motion that doesn't require a seconded, that was putting the public on notice.
No, that follows. First, it's appropriate that the board acknowledges by motion that it's considering. And then I expect Trustee Murphy will then give formal notice. Trustee Elder?
And just so I'm clear in my own head, the notice of motion that follows will come out of the policy committee that the district will provide financial support for trustees to attend BCSTA and BCPC sponsored seminars without the board orientation. And that we had discussed the need to support that by board motion before it goes to notice of motion. In doing so, we said, and let's also include individual professional development and VISTA.
Yes.
So what I think we're debating now is our support for what was proposed, which was BCSTA and BCPC sponsored seminars without the board orientation, and VISTA and individual professional development for trustees. So if we support those four ideas being a notice of motion, then that's what we should agree now, and then hear the notice of motion. So I support the motion with those confirmation that we are actually discussing, debating, hopefully passing our confirmation of consideration of those four elements.
And I
I
see
think my wording was sloppy. Can you say yours again?
Trustee McMurphy's nodding, so she agrees if you want to repeat, Trustee Elder, those four elements.
Well, consideration of confirming
Amendments to policy 3.
amendments to policy 3 that would support trustees attending BCSTA, BCPC sponsored seminars without the word orientation, VISTA events, and individual professional professional development.
I think that's what I said.
Pretty close.
Thank you.
It's clear. Thank you. Trustee, first I'll go to Secretary Reed.
I'm just thinking, would it be helpful for me to put the amendments on the screen?
Yes, let's do that. While that happens, Trustee Hickman.
I believe also there was discussion at committee around the individual trustee requested professional development to be with consideration of budget. There we go.
Good point. Good point, Trustee Hickman, and there they are. All right, thank you. That's helpful, Mr. Reed. Is there any further discussion on this? Motion that we're confirming consideration of this. All right, all in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Trustee McMurphy.
Well, I know it says I'm supposed to give notice of motion, but I'm wondering if at this point it would be better if the chair of the committee gave notice of motion.
No, I think you chaired the committee in this
But I
close.
think at the next meeting,
All right.
I think.
Are you content?
Yeah, I'm content.
All right. Thank you. All right.
Right.
Trustee Van
All
Wel.
right, so, I, Trustee Van Wel, provide notice that at the January 2024 public meeting of the Board of Education, I will move the following motion, the amendments to policy 3, role of the trustee as approved. And it should be right in the motion, so I think you can see it and agree to that.
So
So it
the notice you gave will
will include,
those
yes, so there
specific.
should be a colon after approved.
Good. Thank you, the whole lot of you for getting us through that one. Thank you. Trustee McMurphy, Trustee Manuel, is there anything further with respect to the policy committee?
Thanks.
Okay, thank
My thanks to Trustee McMurphy for helping out.
And you real mess of it tonight, we got through it.
We did, and we're glad you're back, Trustee Manuel, and you're on for reports from trustee representatives.
Oh, goodness, okay. So I'll start it with the Victoria Family Court. And I attended last month for Trustee Silzer while she was away. And I have to say it was really eye-opening. I appreciate having the opportunity to go and listen to some of the people that they had there. So we had two representatives from MIST, and I have their names here. Oh, Gord McGee and Mia Golden, and MIST is Mobile Youth Services Team. And Trustee Silzer in the meeting, actually, the next meeting is tomorrow, and in the agenda, there was a link to a video, and I watched the video, and those two people were in that video talking, and they spoke about how there's a large number of youth that are being recruited by gangs, and a lot of the gangs are actually coming from the mainland. And they are in all three school districts, 61, 62, and 63. There's a lot of youth substance abuse that is happening, and just they sort of talked about, someone asked them like what other things that are happening, and they talked about kids are being groomed. There's this online befriending. There's a thing called boyfriending where they can, actually I just won't go into it because it's not very good. They can target LGBTQ youth, anyway, so it was really eye-opening, and if you have a chance to go to, or you can zoom in on these meetings, just to sort of listen to the two people that were there were very passionate. They don't have a lot of funding. There's just the two of them, and it's a lot of work and it's a lot of heartache for them, but they do the best they can with what they have, and it's a hard job, and not many people can do it, but these two have a passion for it. They also talk about there's a website, so there's a lot of information on the Family Court website. And they also I guess before COVID, they had parent education sessions, and they're looking to start that back up again. So to help parents and see the signs so they can sort of help these kids out. Oh, and they did, and just one other thing, we did have the board chair for XU661, Nicole Duncan, come on, and they were asking questions about why SD61 has discontinued the school liaison program, and she just sort of talked about the reasons, and then it wasn't just a rash decision on their part, that they had been looking into this for about 3 years. And
The police officer.
the police, they had been looking at reviewing the program, and they decided after looking at different evidence-based stuff, they decided to discontinue it. I think there was a lot of people there that weren't excited about that, because having the school liaison officers there can help with prevention of some of these things that are happening in Victoria. Okay, so, and then this past weekend, I went to provincial council, and I'll try to make this quick, sorry. We actually had a lot of interesting presentations. So Friday evening,
Métis Nation BC came and spoke about the programs that they offer for children who can self-identify as Métis, and they have a really interesting Métis Family Connections programs, and they help. The goal for them is to connect Métis families to their community and their culture. The program started out being children 0 to 8, and they're starting to expand into the youth and teens as these children grow up. So it's really quite inspiring that they're able to do this. They had they showed us a small YouTube video, and there's a little girl named Rosie Darling, and she is from Manitoba, I believe Winnipeg. And this is a 6-year-old girl who is Métis, and she told the story about who the Métis are, how they came about being Métis. And it's honestly the cutest thing. And she had these funny little anecdotes, and everybody was laughing. And if anybody wants to see it, you should Google Rosie Darling Métis, and it'll come up and you'll see it. There's a couple of different videos. It's honestly the cutest thing. They did say that they have been developing mini equity scan agreements with some school districts, and One Victoria is one of the districts that they have this agreement with. I know I spoke with Director of Research and Hunter earlier about whether we have one or not. I know we don't, but we don't have a lot of Métis in our district, but there is conversations that are happening with Melissa Austin. So that was good to hear. And then Saturday Saturday morning we had a business meeting, and the president just talked about how the directors are focusing on mental health and well-being. That Carolyn Brody, the president, she's met with Premier Eby and spoken and is in conversations with him about, SOGI and the protests and disruptions at schools and that boards have experienced. And she asked that districts, if they have, any information or statements that they've made, to just let BCSTA know about them so that they're aware of them. And she spoke about the advocacy day that the board chairs had. She felt that there was really good connections that have been made that will have a lasting impact. And then just let us know that any of the leadership series that the BCSTA is putting on, that you can access them after the fact, so they're online for anybody who wasn't able to attend or to go online. And the CEO just spoke about the working groups that are happening, that they've been ongoing, that the standing committees continue to meet and work hard, and that just that there are learning resources on the website that any of us trustees can go and look at. And then we had at the end, we had 3 motions that came in last minute, and all 3 were determined to be emerging. And so all 3 were voted to be emerging, so we voted on them, and all 3 passed. So the first one was in support of youth mental health, and the second one was talked about equity supplement advocacy, and then the third one was a request for the Minister of Education and Childcare to write a letter of support for equity, diversity, and inclusion, or to ask if the minister can send a message of support for the equity and inclusion. And then after the business meeting, we had someone from the Ministry of Childcare, of Education and Childcare come and talk to us about communicating student learning, and they talked about the proficiency scales. As we are aware, we've already been doing it for several years now, but there are school districts that are just sort of starting it up now. And so this was, just to keep them informed on that, and they gave us a pamphlet for that. And Saturday afternoon we had someone from one of the executive directors of the Education Analytics Office. It was all about, people who love data and evidence for decision making. And he walked us through what information is available, where it is, and how it can be used to help with student success. I won't go into that anymore, but if you want to see his slide presentation, it is in the BCSTA Hub. And so that's my report.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Trustee Manuel? Trustee Hickman?
Thank you, Trustee Van Well. I was just wondering if you could send us the link for the video that you saw.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be great.
Absolutely could. Yes.
Thank you. Thank
The
you.
Rosie one?
Yeah. And her real name is Rosie Darling.
Rosie
Yeah,
Darling.
it's available.
Yes.
Just Google Rosie Darling.
All right. Are there any other reports from trustee representatives before we move on? Trustee Alvin?
Chair, I have a report that I've attended on behalf of the board, 2 meetings since our last board meeting of the Memorial Park Society. Memorial Park Society, of course, oversees the operations and everything that has anything to do with Mary Winspear Center, Blue Heron Park, and of course the adjoining land to Blue Heron Park, your bylaw, which is the land that board leases from the Memorial Park Society and on which the park on track and field are located. Always a pleasure to attend and be there with 10 directors and 1 executive director. The board chair, maybe Sheila Fago, attended the park. That's trustee here.
Yes.
And attended the, sorry?
For about a day.
For at least a day. And attended the track opening on behalf of the Memorial Park Society. My role there alongside Council Director Frederick and West Action, Council Chair Mitchell from Sydney, is to be a stakeholder participant in the conversation. There's no one voting all over the camera, but we do attend all the discussions, and I get to express our gratitude for the ongoing partnership with Memorial Park Society at the field that holds the park on track. And also to take that as an opportunity to remind those community leaders about the good work that the school district undertakes every day in every way. So I'm always asked to say something and like to comment on this time spoke on slightly increased enrollment and additional funding that allows us to provide more resources to all our children. And I think it's good for them to hear who we are and what we do. Not only as a board, but as an entire school district, the largest employer on the peninsula. So it's helpful to remind those community volunteers and active leaders about what happens in our school district. And there's also a chance the chair offers for people to ask questions. So there's some good questions. People want to know some things and they ask good questions about where's the increase in enrollment, what might it mean for the future of our communities. And a very good question about police liaison officers and knowing what happened in Victoria. Is this board committed to continue with those programs? They said 100%. And they were all very happy to hear that. Not one of them said yes, but what about the Victoria situation? Why aren't we thinking more about that? So good support around that table, and I'm happy to continue representing this.
Thank you, Trustee Alvin. Last chance, trustees, if there are any more representative reports. Thank you, Trustee Manuel and Trustee Albert. We'll move on to correspondence. There are 2 pieces, the letter from Mr. Morris and the letter from BCPC. Trustee McMurphy.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of questions. There's a very nice note from Mr. Morris. Did he get a response from you or from anybody?
When I received it, I thanked him for it, and I asked him if he wished me to share it with the board, and he confirmed it.
I just wanted to make sure that. And my question is, I know it's just about Sophie Time Statement of Financial Information. Is it out yet?
Mr. Reed?
The filing deadline for this SOPI is December 31st, and so it will come through next month
Okay,
for, I think the next committee day is later in November, so.
so it's next month.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Trustee Silver?
I take it we're into question period then?
No, we're still dealing with correspondence.
Oh, okay.
Do you have any comment or questions with respect to those two items?
Question.
Okay. Well, first, we will move to question period, but first I'll give our partners and public an opportunity, if there are any. I'm not seeing any, so Trustee Silva, you have a question?
Thank you. Just wondering if the local education agreement with the Saanich people has been scheduled yet? It was going to be scheduled for the fall, I believe.
Trustee Everwin, can you hear the question?
Yes, I can. Probably Trustee
Superintendent Everwin?
Trustee Everwin.
I'm glad my colleagues are wrapping their coffee here.
You were just checking to make sure I was awake, and I am. I heard you tell me, Trustee Everwin. The short answer to your question, Trustee Silzer, is no, a date has not been selected yet by the nation. The nation is currently in a recruitment process for Curtis's position, who is retiring at Christmas time, and that has been their priority. We continue to solicit them for a date, but the ball is in their court at this time. But as soon as we hear something, we will certainly let the board know.
Trustee Silver?
Thank you, Superintendent. Today, the government announced that that they're proposing amendments to the School Act to include that all boards establish an Indigenous Education Council in their school district to ensure Indigenous people have input in decisions affecting Indigenous students. So the membership and functions of this IEC, the Indigenous Education Council, will recognize and reflect the local First Nations in whose territories the board operates. So it seems to me that the province is perhaps superseding us in our idea to have First Nation participation at the board table, or that governance will be shared in a fashion with Indigenous communities.
Thank you for that information. I hadn't heard that. Although the topic of IECs was raised briefly at the Vista conference. So obviously it's been on the radar. Good. Thank you, Trustee Silver. All right, I'm not seeing anything else. Sorry. Superintendent?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just through you, my understanding is that, Mr. Chair, you and I will be involved in a conference call to explain more about what the Indigenous Education Councils will look like as they pertain to the School Act, and we should be able to bring some information back to the board later on.
Thank you. Let's move on then to the information item number 17. And you've referred to it already briefly, Superintendent, but it's AP 451. Do you wish to comment on that?
Just to reiterate that it has been updated to reflect the most current understanding of PITA, the Public Interest Disclosure Act, and that will be loaded up onto our website shortly, along with all of the staff training that is required. That is already starting to take place. So that'll be updated and on the website shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustees, is there anything arising from the superintendent's comments on AP 451? All right, trustees, that then completes the agenda for this regular meeting for October 25. Is there any objection to adjourning at this time? Hearing none, I declare that we are adjourned. Thank you again for your commitment and participation. Thank you, guests. Thank you, Superintendent Everett, for joining us virtually, and we'll see you all soon. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah.